but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. I'm done. Sorry about that.
That was good. Yeah. Don't be sorry. This is great. I'm so glad you came out. We got 3 people who I wasn't thinking, like, Brian, I don't think we've interacted with before. So it was great to hear you read. It was really, really good.
Super. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Have you done Shakespeare before?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, high school, we read Caesar. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. No, but I don't know. It's fun. I've been trying to watch some of them Kenneth Branagh movies, and it's more fun than I thought it was going to be.
It is. It's going to be fun. Thanks for coming out, Brian. Get the hell out of here. The link is pinned at the top of the hive mind there, Rotator. Anybody else? You say, well, look, yes, right here.
Ooh.
Hello.
We have an Ezra.
By the way, when I looked this up, the in the first folio here, the 330th line is frailty, thy name is woman. And in the first version I looked up, the 333rd line was so excellent a king that was to this. So just king, great king.
So yeah.
Okay.
That's king, great king. You're doing it. You're ready. You're going. Here we go.
Yeah, let's do the ritual.
You got it? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Oh God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seems to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it. Oh, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead. Nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this. Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother, that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth, must I remember why she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman, a little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why she, even she, oh heaven, a beast that once discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with mine uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules, within a month. Ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing of her galled eyes, she married. O most wicked speed to post, with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue.
See, I'm really glad we picked the section that we did.
Me too. I'm really glad we're forcing everybody to do it too, because like this particular section is getting so much depth and
yeah. Riling up. You built. It was nice, very nice, Ezra.
Well, people are piling up behind you, Ezra. I gotta kick you off and move on.
Oh, wonderful. Peace. That's a good problem.
And by people I mean one person. That is Jeff. Welcome aboard, Jeff. Good to see you, Mr. Surf.
Hello. Hello.
Do you have a copy? Do you need us to have one on display?
I needed a display for me, and yeah, I don't know my motivation, so I'm just going to cold read.
Your motive.
All right, I am going to stop the stream. That is the Grim Grizz Audition, Macbeth stream. We had done a play previously done by Dave Busatil, and a bunch of us did that in our little Hollywood Squares mode, and it was great. So now they've decided to move on and do Macbeth. So they're moving up in the world, but that will likely be over soon. So we will begin the estuary process. I think, when you see the Strait of Hormuz things where they have like this old shipping lane, I think we're going to need something like that with all the ships in the TLC, because the waterways are getting crowded. But that's a good thing. I'm very, very happy about that. And maybe I'll send in an audition tape for Macbeth. A lot depends on when they're doing it. But what we are doing here today on my channel is we are doing a live estuary conversation like we do every Friday. And you might ask, well, how do I get into this estuary conversation? Well, yesterday morning, I posted a link to members of the channel. Membership can be gotten quite easily, really. I'll usually just go over here to member gifting. And let's see, I've used all my free member gifts, so now I got to pay for my own member gifts. And so I'm just going to send out a whole bunch of free memberships. And so if you're not a member and you want to get into this thing, just become a channel member, and you can do that for free. If you come onto the stream and 10 people are gobbling up the memberships as we speak. There are other generous people that off through the live stream will probably also be gifting memberships. And so usually Wednesday or Thursday, I will drop a link in for a Google Sheets doc where you can put in your name and your email address. And then Friday morning, I will send you a link, and then we have this estuary conversation. Some of you might be asking, what is an estuary conversation? An estuary conversation is just a conversation among people, sometimes like this, sort of gathered randomly. And I have no idea what we're going to talk about today, but I anticipate a wonderful conversation. And the way we do this is we introduce ourselves, and then anybody who wants to can pitch an idea to the group of something that we want to talk about. And then the next round, everyone will point to somebody else's idea and say, I liked that idea, and I maybe want to connect that with this idea or whatever, but I think we should talk about that. And I tally up the points, and we have the conversation. And that is how we do estuary. And now I usually sort of bring in people by seniority or frequency. And I think I'm going to bring Andrew on first. Andrew, welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
I'm well.
Good.
Just a little bit tired, but good.
What?
I'm in the future at the moment.
Yeah. What time is it in the future?
3 o'clock.
In the morning.
Yeah.
I always feel bad about this time slot because I know the Aussies, it's a tough time zone for the Aussies, but I appreciate your determination, Andrew. Thank you for giving up your night's sleep. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Failed/new attempting church planter that's moved from South Africa to Australia. The crazy idea of bringing my young family here and trying to make it on the Gold Coast, which is one of the most expensive places in the world, but we're absolutely loving it. And yeah, God's been good.
All right. Wonderful.
But 2 kids. Yeah.
Australia is a beautiful, beautiful place. I've been there once, and they are looking to brew up another event in 2027 in Australia. So I might well get out there. So,
well, if you make it out to the Gold Coast, you're always welcome to come and hang around here.
All right. Well, that sounds wonderful.
I'll come and meet you.
All right. So, Andrew, thank you for coming on. Let's see. Now, the next person is, for those of you who are have been around enough, I was really happy to see my friend Bas sign up for a link. Some of you don't know how important this guy is. If you participated in any of the European festivals, you might have been to his house. He has an estuary in his basement, and he is actually living my dream because he has built a compound for his family And so this guy is a remarkable man. He's done business, he's done theology, he's done all sorts of things. Sorry, Bas, to be introducing you, but you have been on the channel. You're an OG. You were on a long time ago. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Can you hear me, Paul?
I hear you just fine.
Because I couldn't hear anything that Andrew was saying, so that's why I'm asking. Andrew, can you hear me? Good.
I can hear you.
That
Yep.
seems to be the case, but I still can't hear Andrew. I don't know why.
You can't hear Andrew?
No, Andrew, say something again.
Hello, Bas.
Nothing.
Can't hear me. Can you hear
You
me?
maybe should leave and come back after you say whatever you want to say about yourself, and then maybe we've had this bug in StreamYard before where it's usually leaving and coming back. You'll be able to hear everybody.
Okay, I'll do that later. Yeah, just a few words. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very appreciative, Paul, because one of the things that happened was that one of my sons came with a second father. That was Jordan Peterson, and then you became his second father. So that leaves me in number 3, I guess, by now. Anyway, he drew in a few more, and the estuary is thriving at the moment, so that's nice. It's always on a day that I have the city council, so I can seldom be there. But the guys are having a great time, and you made me a complimentary member, so I thought I should do something in return and be present. And I hate the fact that I cannot be in England for the estuary event there, because Cassidy is a great organizer, and I really wanted to be there, but it's not going to be possible for me. It's not going to be in the stars. Apart from that, yes, indeed, I have been there in very early already with you, yeah, I guess this is one of the places where I think that people are really listening to each other. So happy to be part of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, someday, Bas, I think you're a little younger than I am. You'll probably retire, and then you'll get to do more of what you want to do instead of what you have to do all the time. So all these competing things. All right. We got a bunch of regulars, but this guy hasn't been on this channel. But if you're part of the Dawn Patrol, the early morning TLC over there by Dwight, and this guy is a very regular face early in the morning. Scott, Am I Driving? Why don't you introduce yourself? And why is your name Am I Driving?
So it was a play on Jesus Take the Wheel, and and my attempts to try to find a new church home. Calvinism is one of the traditions on the table, and so I'm always asking, is the Spirit leading me? Am I leading myself? Who knows? So yeah.
All right, very good. Welcome, Scott. Anything else you want to say about yourself?
Not really.
Okay. All right. So if you want to know more about Scott, again, you can find him often on the early morning live streams. I'm California time, and a lot of the Eastern time zone streams start early in the morning. And so, I mean, we're almost to the point where you can do TLC 24 hours a day. Bas, can you hear the other people now?
I heard "Am I driving?" but I don't know what the proper pronouns are.
Andrew, say something so we can check
Scott.
Bas's sound.
Bas, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, wonderful. We're coming together here. Now we got a bunch of regulars. I'm going to bring in. Well, Alex hasn't been around for a little while. Alex has a work schedule, but Alex is fairly well known in these parts. Alex, how do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm a Christian father, husband, and a psychiatric nurse by trade.
All right. One of my favorite professions, because psychiatric nurses, they have all the stories, because it's a wonderful and challenging profession. So thank you, Alex, for signing up. Next, I will bring in Paul Allen, the creator of the Universal Basic Institution meme that we have bandied about on the channel. So, Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
That's a good question. Can you hear me? Yes.
I hear you just fine.
All right. Yeah. So I first a father, and somewhere down the line an economist, and I want to be theologian somewhere in there as well. So.
All right. All right. Thank you, Paul. And then a very regular, he signed in. I usually only put 5 slots, but he made his own slot to come in and said, I'll happily cede it to anyone. And Paul said, I might have to leave early. So I thought, we'll just make sure we have enough around the table. So Skank, thank you for joining us. Anything you'd like to say about yourself?
No, not so much. It's not my job to educate you. You guys will figure it out.
Not my job to educate you. Okay, but I thought
not anymore. That was years ago.
I thought you had a fine audition for the Macbeth. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think this order is okay. I'll leave Bas where he is. All right. And so that is the first round of Estuary. Now we are going to proceed to round 2, where you get to pitch an idea to the group. You don't have to pitch. You may pass if you want to, but usually when people come on here, they've got something they'd like to pitch. Andrew, do you have something you'd like to pitch?
I do, but being that this is my first time coming out of the lurk, I should probably be better prepared. I did have an idea that we run a little estuary here. We came up with something called nominal Christianity, which is based off of garden gnomes. When you can't choose between pointy hats or fancy beards, it's the new answer to like the confusion in Christianity. But I won't go with that. I'll rather go with inspired by your conversation recently with I think it was Craig Dibble. Like I was just like I posted a comment on there because it was similar to the Jordan Peterson conversation, where it's like, so what you're trying to say is Paul. Like he kept coming back. It's like, no, you're not understanding me. And yeah, so I felt like it's like what you're trying to say is that reason hasn't been tried, and if we really tried reason and philosophy and all of these things and enough information, then we will fix the world. And you just saying no. That's not how people work. And I would summarize it as actually like the spirit of the age is like, if we say it's anti-Christ, but Christ came to show us the Father. I was reminded of Paul's, you have many guides, but very few fathers. So I think fatherhood is very much involved with anti-Christ or anti-father, and given the confusion with gender and masculinity and information and how do we actually focus this, and then the fact that we've got 7 fathers on here or close to it, or 7 men, most mentioning father except for Skank. Sorry, I see a big nod. That's my pitch.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. Scott, what would you like to pitch?
Yeah, my thought was because of the same conversation, actually, I was thinking a lot about you're trying to give a definition of faith. And one of the things that has kind of come up is this idea of the things we do and whether or not they're important. My wife called what I've been doing here as a hobby, and it kind of stung me a little bit because I felt it to be a little bit more important than a hobby, and I was kind of thinking about why that would bother me so. But I think if I'm being led by the Spirit and I'm doing something that the Spirit's called me to do, whether it's to change my shirt or do whatever, that thing is important. And I'm struck by his fear, Biffle, his fear of blind faith, and what we would be doing and projecting that into the world. And so that's kind of where I'm at with, is it important And if so, is that the thing that the secular world would be scared of because we're willing to put such an importance on the everyday, mundane, or what OG Rose and Michelle have been talking about with enchanting your everyday life?
All right. Wonderful. Very good. Thank you. Bas, do you have a pitch for us?
Well, I listened to your little tutorial into I hope I pronounce his last name correctly, Leslie New Beginning or New Begin, and these different views of religion in modernity. And temperamentally, I'm very much one of those guys who say, well, there's true belief in everyone, and let's share what we really believe, what we experience, and whether you're a secularist or a Hindu, I don't really care, and I can discover something of God in everyone. But I'd like to explore a little bit where that leaves us with Jesus, and what our task is, if some of us at least would say, well, I'm a Jew or I'm a Christian, etc. What is the contribution of your faith tradition? That's okay. That's lame, I know, but what is your own experience in that conversation? How can you add gold to the table, bring gold to the discussion, and at the same time be very open? I'd really like to explore that a little bit, where that leaves us, and what kind of attitude that requires from us. And then, of course, you can bring that back to the interview you had, of which I only saw your second reflection, so I haven't seen the interview. And whether or not we can inspire others to engage in a conversation that also makes them more curious. And I'm saying this also as a dad, in the sense that most of our kids actually came home with non-Christian partners. So that's an interesting demand on ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bas. Alex, do you have a pitch?
Yes, I do want to mention the conversation we had with Craig Biddle, because I thought it was very interesting, because he did try really, really hard to get you to understand his point of view, and yet it's like I don't know. But anyways, I do want to mention that he did ask as far as faith, and he wanted you to describe faith, and he didn't like your description. He didn't like whatever your interpretation, your experience, and there's so many things that I would like to say about that, but I will narrow it down to just something short and sweet-ish. So if you allow me for a couple of seconds. So we can, I think one of the things that we do when we talk to people that are from different backgrounds, whether that's philosophical, spiritual, cultural, you name it, doesn't matter, rich, poor, young, old, it's hard to have what we call theory of mind. And we begin to teach these to toddlers, and also autism. When someone's autistic, you kind of have to have them kind of learn the theory of mind. And in the psychology world, there's the soft psychology, the Myers-Briggs, where they have 16 types of how everybody's calibrated a little bit different. So, but I don't want to go into that. But when it comes to faith, and it's something that he couldn't grasp, or he didn't like your explanation, so I'm going to give my opinion, and it's just that my opinion. I could be wrong, but it's something that's outside of us. It's the metaphysical, where physics can't quite describe. And I'm going to give two examples. Well, I'd like to give more than two examples, but I'll just do two examples right now because I want to make it quick. So my pitch is faith something that comes almost outside of us? Almost. Some people might say, well, it depends. So I'll give you so here's one example. Saul of Tarsus had a specific faith and a specific background and education, and he wanted to go after the Christians. And he had an encounter with Christ. And we no longer have Saul of Tarsus. We have Paul the Apostle. But if we were to put them side by side, so like AI generated, we can clearly see that these are two different people. That Saul of Tarsus would try to take out Paul, the Apostle Paul, even though they're the same person. But the difference is the encounter that they had with Christ, where Paul sees the world differently than when he was just a Sadducee. And this is something that is hard to explain, but only it's kind of like the saying, how do you know you're pregnant, right? You know, it's like you just are. There's no kind of pregnant. Halfway pregnant. You know, the woman say, no, I'm pregnant or I'm not pregnant. There's no in between. So the other example is Jacob. Jacob was Jacob, and Jacob was calibrated the way he was. And then he had an encounter. He wrestled with God. And then after that, he never walked the same because, well, he wrestled with God. And he then became Israel. Same person, different person. Same but different. What happened? Faith happened, where the person was completely different. And it's hard to explain such an event if you never encountered. Because I've most of my teenage years and early 20s, I ran away from God. I tried to avoid him as all get out. And I had an encounter with him, and I've never been the same ever since. And I can't describe it. I just know what I know, and that's it. So I can only give my opinion. But anyways, I'll leave it at that.
All right, good pitch. I like the idea that Saul would go after Paul. I never quite kind of put it together like that. So you might see that in a sermon sometime. So if you do, just take silent credit for it. That's fine. I rip people off. Paul, do you have a pitch?
Yes. Ascension and self-delusion. And I think ascension is necessary in our thinking. And this is really mirroring a lot of what Alex just said, which is we transform as people. And developmentally, this is very clear, but if you can see that in others, like my wife has been doing some reading recently, and some of the things she's been saying are new and interesting. And I think, oh, there's been a transformation in her thinking on this, and this is good. There's more to go into, but I think the conflict is when are we ascending? When are we self-deluding? And in that, often we see people who are acting as if they have ascended, and I just wonder, is this just a self-delusion? And then how do I manage those things? This isn't going to help your cult image, Paul, since we're talking about our personal ascendance. But yeah.
All right. Anxious for my cult image. Skank, do you have a pitch?
Yeah, I do. I think it plays a little bit off of Alex a little bit, and maybe ties into Paul, but from the bottom rather than from the top. And I'm once again inspired by Ezra's movie night last night, where we watched They Live. And one of the things that's a feature of that movie is that there's this special set of glasses that when you put them on, you start to notice that there's this alien invasion going on. There's this subset of humanity that is not human, and that they are seeking to control us. And one of the things that I brought up in the discussion is, for those of you that spend time on Twitter and whatnot, you guys like not have heads familiar with the NPC meme, non-player character, a little bit. So I don't need to really explain it, but there's the idea that like there's a certain, I don't know, like level of humanity that is not educated enough or thoughtful enough to be considered actually having agency or actually contributing to, pushing the ball forward, progressing society. And so it is our duty as the smart people to control them. And I hate this meme with all of my heart. Like it's disgusting. It's reprehensible. But as I also said, damn it, if it doesn't sometimes describe how things appear pretty well sometimes. And so I want to like talk with you guys about how do we deal with how do we account for the different levels of gifting as far as intellect, as far as ability. Not talking so much about those that actually have like a diagnosable disability. I mean, although and neurodivergence are overrepresented here, so we'll get them apart. But I mean, like specifically just people that are, lower IQ, but still like perfectly normal. How do we account for normies? How do we account for folks that we might be tempted to describe as NPCs? And how do we talk about them in a way that actually anticipates their presence in a way that's welcoming them as neighbors? Because like the big thing I hate is just how much dehumanizing language flies around so easily. And yeah, I want to know how to fight back in a way that works well.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Skank. Going to fight back in a little different way than Rowdy Roddy Piper, huh? I saw that movie years ago. It's a fun movie. So fun that Ezra picked it up. Okay, we have finished the pitch round. Now we're on to the pointing round, where you get a chance to point to someone else's idea and tell us why it caught your interest. Andrew.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to weave between Skank's, Paul's, and Bass's, where Skank, I think you kind of summed it up with the normies idea, with similar to what I've been thinking about with regards to just church. How do we communicate this thinky-talky space to everybody? How do we actually engage with everyone? And I think, Bass, your engagement of Jesus with other faiths, how do we engage what we're talking about with other people, connected there? And I think, Paul, you kind of summed it up with how do we actually describe whether we're actually ascending or just self-deluded? How do we actually find accurate information that we're actually growing and then communicate it to everyone?
All right. Very good. Thank you, Andrew. Scott, what would you like to point at?
Yeah, I see the thread too. I even see with the faith working into that. So I think Skanks would probably start us off nicely into bringing all those together.
Okay, very good. Bas, what would you like to point to?
Yeah, I think I'll weave a little bit between Alex and Matt. I don't know if skank is an insult in English. I don't know. Is it?
It is. But
it's kind of yes, kind of no. It's a polysemous
You're okay with
word.
it? You're okay with it? Okay.
I chose it myself. Well, the name also kind of chose me. It's also a dance for those that are enthusiasts of the ska music community, which is the primary but not the only reference.
Well, if the name chose you, then you're awfully close to Alex's team. When faith happens to you, and I guess, yeah, a profound appreciation of the experience of everyone includes a humility to not only engage with other intellectuals, but also with the how God interacts with people that you might think are normies or non-character players. And I think that would be a lovely conversation.
All right, very good. Alex, what would you like to point to? Oh, you're muted.
I'm also going to go with Matt Skank, because as far as how to deal with people that we might be quick to dismiss, because my 9 to 5 involves talking to people that society has dismissed. And if you work there long enough, you quickly realize they're just regular people. They're just regular folks. And the reason why they appear to be somewhere, I'll say it like this, in a sticky position, like stuck. Why they're stuck? Most of the time, has something to do with something from outside of them. And by that, I mean their childhood. So there's the Reese monkey experiment where they, they did the experiment with monkeys, but I know, Paul, you mentioned I think the orphans, I think the Romanian War, where it was not an experiment, but it was an experiment where what happens when we're so vulnerable, like when we get neglected or abused when we're like 1 year old or 6 months old or 2 year old, it does have an effect on you. And there's a way to get unstuck, but until that happens, you begin to feel like these people are not normal. But I reassure you, most of them are just like you and me. They're just they just had the bad luck, I guess, for the lack of a better word. Now, I know what you might think, but they're adults now. Yeah, but it's kind of hard to understand something so profound as neglect as in childhood. Then, but everything gets calibrated through that lens. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
All right, very good, Alex. Paul, what would you like to point to?
Skank.
All right, Skank, that puts you in the unenviable position of winning the vote already, but having to point to something else. So,
well, my first point was to Paul, because I appreciate the I always love talking about like I think one of the things Paul was getting is sort of like epiphanies, the feeling of kind of like leveling up in your thinking. And it really is like it's an intoxicating place to be. And if you get kind of good at learning, you can kind of become, I don't know, like low-key addicted to that sort of thing. It's a lovely thing to chase. But then that becomes like chasing change for change's own sake, which, if all you're seeking is change, it's a lot easier to find change by getting worse rather than getting better.
Yeah. All right. It's pretty clear, as Scott said, it's pretty clear what's developing here, and I think we will start with Skank. I will say though that probably part of what really struck me was the transformations that Alex talked about too. We're prepping the Sacramento Estuary Conference, and I selected the special guests. They're not really speakers. I'm not really going to give them speeches to make, but it's all going to be sort of about transformations. And we're going to have a Dutchman named Tim Blackman, who grew up in the Netherlands. His father left. He's an African-American. He left America because of the racism in the South and moved to the Netherlands and married a Dutch woman and had 3 sons in the Netherlands. And this is the middle son, who then became a Christian and then went to Calvin Seminary, where friends of mine met him. And then we recruited him to be a church planter in Sacramento. So he's a fun guy. And, we've got some guys from the TLC. So I like transformations. But Skank's point here. Well, Skank, why don't you start off and say a little bit more about your pitch, and then I'm sure it'll go from there.
I'll tie in. Because again, the big thing I'm concerned about, especially like around here in the TLC, we have developed a community that has its own language, has its own lingo, and one of the things that binds us together is that we're all people that have been able to pierce through the layers and layers and layers of kind of like linguistic obfuscation. Like it takes a while to kind of like know what the hell everyone else is saying and be able to talk back coherently, which like I think is more feature than bug. But it also is, once you become naturalized here, there's a very clear member of the group versus outside the group, and dealing with in-group, out-group tensions. How do you relate to the out-group? How do you relate to the outsider is something that I'm like really concerned about, because we like it here because we have found a space of belonging to a certain extent. And so how do you I feel like I'm already moving far away from what my initial pitch was, but like, how do you create a space that is both tight belonging, but that also is actually open to outsiders coming in? is this weird thing where like we can't create easy on ramps because that tears apart the tight belonging that we have. And I see Paul has interjections. Go for it. Paul Allen, that is.
Are you okay if I steel man the MCP concept?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
So I would say that there are real layered dimensions of intellectual, spiritual maturity, or depths in which people perceive the world. And these are describable, and this is not just BS. I think there's things that it's consequential, I guess. And we all, while this isn't like a ladder which you easily climb up with defined levels, there is a depth of knowing. So like in music, it's very obvious that you start out playing an instrument. There are things you do not hear that as you play the instrument for years and years, you begin to hear new things in the instrument. You begin to participate in the music on a different level. And so it goes from playing the notes to expressing emotions and sort of things that were not even seen at the beginning are manipulated in extreme ways as you get some mastery. And I think many things in life are of that, are developed in a similar fashion. Therefore, there are people who are less mature along a number of dimensions, and they're much more easily acted upon by the world because they do not perceive that they are being acted upon by the world. And and I think there is a greater, there's less culpability in that state of being, because you are much more being acted upon than being agent. And then as you level up, you increase your culpability and your understanding, your level of agency in the world. So in a sense, there is an NCP sort of thing happening where there are these lower agency folks, and that's what some people are just going to live the will of God in this less aware state, and then some people are going to elevate. There's the further up and further red, and I'm like, hopefully I ascend more, but that means death and resurrection. So there's more ego death for me, and hopefully there's more ascension after that. We'll see. But I think like I perceive that I have come a long ways, and I perceive my children ascending in similar ways. And so I think there's understanding that we're not all equal in this regard. And maybe, but it's not a derogatory, oh, you're an NCP, you're less of a person. It's okay, you're being acted upon more by the world, and therefore we have greater accountability for culturally for your well-being. Is that, I throw that out there, I'm not committed to it, but that's sort of where I'm at.
Underlying a lot of this, and I'm getting into this with some of the Newbegin stuff, is the question, is there actually an order? Is there a sacred social order? Is there are there hierarchies of maturity that are meaningful? And if so, is there an obligation that we as individuals and institutions, educational, religious, etc., governmental, have to try to help people with these transformations? And, you know, as Alex mentioned, you've got Saul and you've got Paul. Is there a hierarchy between Saul and Paul, or is the difference between them incidental? Same with Jacob and Israel. And we wrestle with that. But as you notice, Paul, there's not just one single hierarchy. There are multiple hierarchies, and people might be mature in a certain area and immature in another area. And, when to get to Bas's pitch about religions, if you have, and Bas will be conversant in some of this stuff, if you have an element of common grace theology in your matrix, you can recognize that by general revelation, different individuals and communities can be ahead of someone, even if you think your particular theological, ecclesiastical, or philosophical ladder goes up. So but yet, as I think part of consciousness just sort of focuses things and creates binaries, and so it's always better, worse, better, worse.
I'm on board with all that, Paul. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Go ahead, Alex.
So I think one of the reasons why we seem to have this kind of all or nothing mentality where either you're high functioning or you're just an NPC and there's no in between, sort of speak, is because our perspective might be calibrated different than everybody else. So, and this is where I'm going to go with this. There's different types of metaphorical successes, because the word success means something to different people. You can be financially successful, you can be morally successful, you can be relational, like in a relationship successful, you can be successful in your health, you can be successful in many different ways. But personal experience, there's been people in my life that like my dad, in some way you can say that he was very successful, and at the same time, he was very unsuccessful in a different dynamic. And I know that from a personal experience, but that helped me to see a little bit more, because I know that there's more than one different way to be successful. And sometimes we just get stuck on, because we see what we see and we think that everybody else is calibrated the same as we are. So if you don't have what I have that I value, say, for instance, by and large, everybody thinks if you're wealthy, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, then you're very successful, right? So if you have that one thing that I'm passionate about, you're good. But if you don't, not good.
Yep. All right, let's hear something from the upper row. Go ahead, Bas.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency in us to want to feel secure in a hierarchy or in a group. So if you can be on top of the, let's say, American football hierarchy, you'll go for that. If you're slightly less talented, you may go for academics, or even less, you can go into a religious group, and then you can still be something. And if we look back at the Second World War, a lot of non-playing characters actually ended up in the National Socialist movement, because we all have a feel that we want to mean something somewhere, and if it's not in the main race, then at least in some side race. If you can't be a champion in Olympic sport, you choose another one. You get what I mean? This is a natural tendency, but I think Jesus upends that. I'm always amazed at the discussions we have about Catholics and Orthodox and Jews and Protestants about what's the best, and then Jesus says something like never let yourself be called a father, because you're all brothers. Boink. Everybody who calls for hierarchy, especially Orthodox, and then he says, don't let yourself be called a rabbi, you're all brothers. And then he says, don't let yourself be called a teacher. So there goes all the Protestants and academics. And also with the foot washing, etc., I think he upends that. And there's a reason for that. I think the whole Sermon on the Mount is on that you can never be perfect. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see who of us lowlives, we're all lowlives, is taller than the other. And then he says, no, be as perfect as God is, as your Father is, your Heavenly Father. So he's setting us a game, an end. a game that we can never win. And I think he does that because of what Paul was saying, his ego death thing. And until we stop comparing ourselves with someone else to see if we are secure in the group, until we find our security in something greater, in God's love, we are also not able to see how God is working in that other person. So you may be not interested in the thoughts of that normie until you see how much God is already doing, or as Alex is saying, how people start off in life and then what's being repaired on the way. It's fascinating. And I really think that if you're coming from a place of love and awe of what God is doing, then you have a completely different conversation. Like you have as a father, you don't expect your 4-year-old to engage with you in a discussion about economics. Paul, you're not doing that, are you? So it's probably you want to see how that 4-year-old is progressing, and once you do that, you may end up with let go of your, who was saying that, theory of self or theory of mind, that oh, you can also look at yourself as just being a low life. We're just grass comparing each other on the length of our little reed, rather than seeing how far the sun is over and above us. That's my 50 cents for it.
All right. Thank you, Bas. Go ahead, Paul. Do you lecture your children on economics?
Yes, but not lecture. It's very it's very it's very practical and hands-on. But yes, they don't know. It's very subtle. So I go to the passage of Peter, and because I'm Catholic, I have to pull up this passage. No, but it's like Peter's denied Christ, and he's denied Christ 3 times. And so really there's this ego death where he thought he had this great faith, and now he's realized, no, there's a death and resurrection that sort of happens in Peter's ego as he dies, and then after the resurrection, Christ comes in and says, all right, do you love me? And the orientation, the question is, do you love me? It's, are you oriented properly towards God? And now sort of repairing that denial. And so the reorientation, and then there's the 10 by lambs, 10 by feed by sheep. And it's the threefold reflection that sort of reflects the threefold denial. And it's there's sort of an ascension that Peter takes on. There's an ego death within what he had to die to self and realize that his faith is it's not as strong as he thought it was. And then sort of the recommitment, and then with that there is the responsibility of tending, and I think that's really the call of fatherhood, is realizing your kids are not going to be perfect. You are not going to be the perfect father, but you have this accountability, at least good fatherhood. And so it's the notion that we have to tend. There are people who are in different sports, and we have to tend for them where they are. But how do we make that not a negative thing, or not a superiority? Just where we are present in the social order.
Scott or Andrew, you guys, one of the things with bringing 7 in something like this, it's you're gonna have to speak up because we do want to hear from you.
I'm just trying to function as a normie translator, just clinging on to some of Bas's and Paul's conversation. That's, I think what you're saying, Alex, you summed it up with, well, how do we define success? What is the map that actually leads to ultimate success? What is what does it actually look like? What are our ladders? What walls are they attached to? Like in, I think, PBK, your analogy, it's like we talk about it and we like to think we know what progress is, but I don't know if we do. And how do we communicate that to average people? How do we communicate that to each other? How do we define that success? I think I had a phrase that I would use, that our goals should be like a realistically unattainable goal. As I took it from Peterson, where it's like, man, when we're going to actually progress to anything, we're only actually happy when we're making progress towards a goal. But if we ever attain it, then we're going to be disappointed. So we have to have a realistically but unattainable goal. And I think stumbled into something of theosis for myself, but from a very unorthodox perspective, that actually just becoming more and more like the Father or like Christ is ultimately the goal that I think many people are drawn to. But how do we communicate that? How do I communicate that? How do I display that to people that don't necessarily have my same shared faith? That's why I was interested in, Bas, I think, your conversation. How do I communicate that to my father-in-law, who was an incredible Christian, got all of his brothers and sisters saved, married a lady who was not a Christian, and now is not walking with God, but is still the most incredible sacrificial father and husband and generous person that you can imagine. I don't know. Some people would say, hey, he's not a Christian. He's not this. He's not right. I can't deny the fact that he's an incredible man. We can't have conversations like this around faith because he's been hurt by church, and he's been hurt by a God that disappointed him because he prayed for his wife to get saved and she didn't. But then at the same time, he married somebody who wasn't saved. And what do we even mean by saved, I guess? And throw a whole nother bomb there, I guess.
I think you were speaking to the thing here is that it's embodiment. We pray that in our engagements with everybody in the world, this one here with y'all, that the truth is somehow in me and moving through me, but it's not of me. It's a sweetness, and I think that's how it's worked through the years and growing where it's at, and that allows you then to see somebody who isn't, because I don't like the level analogy either, because I like it more as babes, the way it's said, babies to adults in the faith. And you're going to give milk to the baby, and if we're embodying it and loving all of God's creation, then that allows us to, in those moments where we run into the NPC or the noob into the corner, that somebody would be open to allowing them to my bosom, but not my bosom, right? To his bosom that comes through me.
And, this is all Jesus' fault, because this is the guy that says, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." And I always point out the context in the Sermon on the Mount there, because God sends the rain on the just and the unjust, and the sun to shine on the fields of the just and the unjust. The farmer that has eaten up everybody's land, bought all the poor people's land, God still sends him rains for the crops to grow, instead of strangling his field like all of the people who've become poor because of his avaricious farm acquisitions. That's what everybody wants, and God doesn't do it. And that's the perfection that Jesus points to. And it's like, and so Jesus on one hand says, gives this incredibly high bar in the Sermon on the Mount, and then also says exactly what Bas said. Love the stranger all the way up to and including your enemy. And it's like he both takes he's both more hierarchical and accepts a hierarchical label, such as Son of Man and Son of God, and flattens out all of his disciples. He's either the ultimate tyrant or the servant of all. And when you look at him, it's hard to figure it out. And we're all still trying to figure that out because not only of what he said, but, I made the point in my sermon last week, some people say, well, it was the teaching of Jesus. In the Apostles' Creed says nothing about the teaching of Jesus. It's all his acts and his life and the claims about who he is. I mean, it's Jesus set up this whole mess, so he's to blame.
So
can I say something? Can I jump in here? Oh, go ahead, Alex.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, and I think a reason we also doubly struggle with this in the West is even the idea of like noting different like degrees that challenge our presumptions towards equality are heresy, which is part of why, like, I think the NPC meme caught fire on the internet is because it's that like speaking like a forbidden truth that we all can see is that there are levels in society. There's a diverse allocation of gifts that and you most notice it in areas of lack versus areas of abundance, because also part of the problem with, or one of the temptations when kind of like reckoning with hierarchies is oftentimes we care about hierarchies because we're seeking to lift ourselves up over and against others that are below us. We're far more interested in who we're on top of versus who is on top of us.
Skank, you reminded me, I always think of that when you think of marketing. They always want to get you in an exclusive in-group where it's like, you can be in, but you're not like those guys. Get MasterCard or Visa or whatever. You can be the exclusive but inclusive group. And I think is that appeal, we kind of trying to approach the opposite, but we still kind of identify as something of that. We've got this inclusive group, but how do we actually relate to those that are outside of it? Go for it, Alex.
There's one thing that I have to say that it's not often said, and probably for good reason, because most people do not receive that very well. And whether you're secular or in faith, it doesn't matter. It's received the same way, almost in a negative way. And so I'll say this: there is an enemy, and if you're not careful, and if you don't prepare properly, and if you don't take life seriously, you will be had. You will go. You'll trip. You'll get stuck. You'll go down a downward spiral. So there is an enemy, and the enemy is legit. And now, if you're secular, you're like, well, what do you mean? So the ancient philosophers that you say, you are your worst enemy. Know thyself, because temptation, whether you're secular or not, temptation comes always, and we always have to make a choice. And whether we understand the choice is a completely different conversation, but the temptation always comes, whether you're religious or not. It doesn't matter. The enemy is real, and but again, that conversation as far as the enemy, and that we have to stand, and we have to understand the war, the battle. We have to understand the enemy. We have to understand what's in front of us, our options, our choices, and how to prepare best. So when the storm comes, your foundation doesn't just crumble because, we built it on sand.
I'm going to push back on the notion that the exclusivity is a positive thing. Alex is right, there is an enemy. And so if you look at the Psalms and you look at David, David was anointed, and then he was chased by Saul, and then he was threatened by temptation, and he succumbed to temptation. And it is at the the exclusive anointed point where he had high agency. He was a special person called by God, and in those positions of awareness and in calling, you're fighting a bigger battle. So if I think as Peter and all of the apostles, as they sort of ascended spiritually in the recognition of Christ, now they were fighting a bigger battle, and they had accountability to go out to all the nations and spread the good news. And they all died. They almost all died in doing so. So I think there's a naivete that one has where the levels as they go up, it's this is an exclusive good thing. I mean, if we want to call them levels, I think about the economists who are notably smarter than me and who are more capable than me, and they're all crazy one way or the other. Like they're all lost in their own world. There's a lot of like mental breaks that happen, and I don't know of any other way to say it. They're incredibly detached from reality in their theoretical like world that they live in, and I won't name names, but it's what I want to be as
we've seen it.
No, but what I want to be as smart, and people who are, and I think people think about me that all the time about me, like Paul's so detached, he's in this theoretical world. That's fair. And then there's a certain level of, and you're dealing with bigger forces, perhaps, Alex, and so, but I think there's a defense of the NPC that is part of this and a fatherhood there. And I'm going to stop because I've said that before.
Bas, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I hear a lot of things that come a little bit together. Paul is talking about ascension. I think Jesus is showing that the way up is actually the way down. So you have the incarnation and the ascension, the becoming man and the becoming son of God are going at the same time. And I think we are doing it at the same time, but by becoming more human, we actually become more like him. These paradoxical sayings are so profound, and I think all of them have to do with stop comparing yourself to the other grass elements and go for this long hierarchy, the hierarchy that you actually achieve by going down. And when Andrew is talking about his father-in-law, it was Andrew, that's really touching me. I mean, in the church, we are often so much comparing ourselves just in these little gradations that you have of good and bad, and then people are being denounced or getting a hard time because they can't make it work, or they have these ideas that they have to be better prayers than they are in order to get some kind of benefit from God. And I think it's all so much this level, this comparing each other. And when Paul was quoting Peter with the 3 times that Jesus restores him, he starts with him like, do you love me more than the others do? Because that was Peter's claim. And then that sort of dawns on him that that's not a challenge that Jesus is asking, it's a rebuke. And then after that, he passes through that, and then it's just, it's you don't have to be better than the others. You just have to love. And I think that's such a different way of looking at it. And then up becomes down and down becomes up, and we can integrate and we can be. I've worked with some very great minds in economics, and you're absolutely right. There is such a competition amongst them. It's not healthy. And then when you find out that what they talk about is really achievable, but only by following Jesus' example and building on. That's why I guess the concept of trust, which is so close to the concept of faith that we have, is so game changing in economics now. As it is game changing in the lives that Alex was talking about. Faith comes in, trust comes in, and we get to this positive equilibrium, this Nash equilibrium that's positive, that people start seeing that we can work together, and then all of a sudden the economy changes. And I think that's exactly what Jesus is teaching us. Make the jump of faith, make the jump of trust. So yeah, some thoughts to connect what you guys have been saying.
Jesus says that crazy thing about unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. I mean, he just keeps saying these things. I mean, you think you have them all worked out, and then he throws something out like that, you know, and then we're like, what does it mean for my righteousness to be more than theirs when they are so scrupulous and so controlled and so, and then I think, go ahead.
I mean, that's the thing with them. Like, the thing he keeps chiding them for is, again, you're doing right, but you're like a closed garden. Like, it's the exclusion that he gets at. It's them closing themselves off from those that are on the fringes. And the big thing that he keeps teaching them is mercy, forgiveness. That's going above and beyond Pharisee righteousness.
I guess the question I got is, in trusting God, do you trust everyone?
That's a big no.
Especially with an enemy out there.
That's a big no.
Right.
Love is not the same thing as trust.
So I'll
love, not to trust.
Right. No, you have to be wise as, so gentle as doves, but wise as serpents.
Surfers, wise as surfers.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't have to be naive and gullible, because I mean, let's give the example that I like to give from the past that everybody knows, has heard of. Genghis Khan. He's a person, right? He did what he did because he could, and if anybody tried to stop him, he's like, right, see what happens. So people are people, and we just have to accept that everybody's different. I mean, there's like 8 billion of us. How can we think that everybody's just like me? That's ridiculous, right? So everybody's going to be calibrated differently, and there is such thing as the people that are very selfish, and that's it. Genghis Khan is the example that everybody knows, and everybody knows that you cannot persuade them with philosophy or with this or that or with kindness. Genghis Khan is going to have what he's going to have, regardless of what philosophy you pitch at him or with the kindness that you pitch at him. These people, and the good thing is that at least they're not the majority, or so I hope. They are just who they are, and they will do what they will do, and good luck. They'll say, try to stop me if you can. And that's, I mean, it'd be nice if Genghis Khan was just a fictional person, if he didn't exist. But then Alexander the Great. I mean, pick your century. There's always a person to exemplify what people are capable of doing. So no, we don't have to be gullible just because we're Christians, in my opinion.
Right. But what I was kind of getting at was the exclusionary thing then, right? So cells have cell walls, and there's gateways for what comes in and comes out. So I know how I discern it, but it's not practical to the babes of the faith, right? So I use prayer and a guiding of the Spirit to determine whether or not I go talk to the man down at the end of the road with the 2 scrolls. But the babes can't do that. The NPCs can't do that. So what determines then what NPCs come in, right? and then how to cultivate those NPCs to be able to grow and mature is, I guess, a better way of asking that question about who to trust.
Go ahead, Bas.
Scott, if you say, if we trust God, do we trust everyone? We've been thinking a lot of the lessons that economics can learn from faith. And one of the great lessons that we need sometimes is that, yes, you're right. Alex is right. There are people playing like self-interested persons and people playing like altruists. But most people are playing like, if you're good to me, I'm good to you. And if you're bad to me, I'm bad to you. This sort of the golden rule of social behavior. And what you want to create a group is that is good for each other. So that's why you get your group boundaries and stuff like that. Yet, if Jesus says love your enemies, he say put your trust in your enemies somewhat, not because you trust them. I think I agree with Alex, but you to trust God that he will not let you down in that process. So you're able to extend the circle of trust by experimentally bringing the other one in and see if he or she can then be persuaded also to join the circle of trust, because we are those people that are selfish or that are altruistic, etc., depending on the circumstances. And if we are being drawn into that group that is built on trust, that's built on God's or built on Jesus' sacrifice or what have you, that's a very economic way of saying you're expanding the circle of trust. You're expanding the boundaries that you do have to work through. I mean, if someone is not living up to the circle of trust, then the other group members need to protect the public good that is being produced by trusting each other. So is this something that you could mean when you say, if we trust in God, you can trust everyone? Is that something that fits with your thinking, Scott?
Yeah, I was more asking in terms of Matt and his original kind of with the exclusionary inclusion kind of dynamics, and where do you kind of draw the line for that more so? Because like I said, I tend to rely on the Spirit to move me, and I trust in that movement of the Spirit in how I interact in my day-to-day life. It's just, we've been talking a little bit about what we fold in and what we don't fold in and who we exclude through some of the conversations in the corner as of late. And I guess I was looking for a more practical way for people to be able to see that if they're not maybe as in tune to the Spirit as I at least sometimes feel like I am.
So I think I'm going to have to mention institutions here. I think the institutions provide a framing for the experimental inclusion and then testing. I mean, they're particular like rules and forms within an institution of like, all right, we bring someone in, we give them a chance, and if they break the rules, they're going to have to be excluded. And the institution does two things. It provides institutional wisdom to someone with less scope in their thinking, and it provides them a clear frame of, oh, okay, this is how we handle someone new coming into our church or into our workplace or what have you. And then there are clear processes and procedures, but it also creates a structure so that someone who may have more wisdom in those regards, and we're all going to have wisdom in different regards, is positioned as to make those decisions, or assist in making those decisions of inclusion or exclusion. So I think the practical thing is the thing that's all around us. It's these institutions which allow us to have these ins and outs.
The question there then is, are our current institutions sufficient for that, or is that what we kind of bumping up against? That I think with the access to information, with the internet, with being exposed to every ideology and faith and practice and like the flood of humanity coming in, are our current institutions actually shaping us in that way? And I think that's kind of what we're wrestling with at the moment. So.
Without unpacking all the stuff I'm thinking about that, I would say that the key question is, what institutions am I going to engage in?
There is something that I want to mention that you guys have been talking about is we have to be, sorry, let me make it an I statement. In my opinion, I think it is important to understand the concept of boundaries and why it's reasonable to have boundaries, and why it's reasonable to have purpose, and why it's reasonable to have proper function. So in order to allow something, you have to disallow something else. And I think this is a conversation that's had in the corner. I'll give you an example, practical example. If we're going to engage in chess and we're going to attend the chess championship, you're not going to go there and start playing basketball and be like, oh, yeah, sure. We'll do chess basketball. That's no longer chess, right? If you want to play basketball, there's a time and place to do that. And there's a time and place to do this. So boundaries do matter. And there's a reason to have boundaries. Now, I'm always concerned if I begin to have the notion that boundaries are bad, structures are bad, purpose is bad, to stand for something is bad. I don't advise that. I think boundaries are important. Now, we have to understand because boundaries are going to do two things. They're going to keep things out and keep things in. And that's where I say that the whole thing about purpose, like chess. If you're going to play chess, then play chess, not basketball. Basketball's a different day, right? Go to the basketball tournament down the street, So in a group, in a community, there's always going to be an exception. There's always going to be an outlier. There's always going to be someone that's rebellious. But the exception does not make the rule. The exception proves the rule.
So we were talking about exclusion, and then we sort of morphed over into the question of community, and because exclusion and community, you don't have a community without at least differentiation. On that, the woman from the Church of England that Justin Brierley and Belle Tyndall had, she had a really nice section on organization versus institution, which is very interesting in terms of these issues, because organization tends to be something which is pointed towards a specific outcome, at least in her definition. An institution was something a little bit more arenic, in which you're trying to foster, let's say, a being state instead of a doing state or an outcome state. And so part of what, I really liked Andrew's story about his father-in-law, because it brings into the conversation the fact that you don't have these collective bodies without certain kinds of filters. And so the filter, ostensibly the filter of a profession of faith in Christ, explicitly and specifically in the church, is supposed to pursue an outcome of a quality of community within that church. And in the case of his father-in-law, here is someone who expressed many of the qualities of that community, but not the boundary label. And life, of course, is full of these kinds of tensions. And when we started talking about multiple hierarchies, that's, of course, part of what we engaged with. And the same for, Paul Allen's example of the Nobel Prize winners in economics, who probably might not be, nobody should perhaps entrust them as treasurer for your club or with the budget for your family. And so then you have the question of place in different size bodies. That Nobel Prize winner might be a very helpful participant in a multi-million population body, such as a nation state, or even a billion plus body like a world economy. But how he functions in your 30-member club might be an entirely different thing. And so in each case, to bring in a little bit of biblical language that some might not be familiar, you have to sort of discern the body. And part of what makes this Christian conversation difficult is that, churches are institutions that are overtly Christian, but one of the big conversations we're having right now is how do those adjectives relate to nation states? How do those adjectives relate to communities in which there are multiple and competing other tags? So Bas mentions, okay, so here a family member comes in, and on one hand, you're policing a boundary because you want an outcome for that family member. But then in Andrew's case, you have the question of, does that tag that we're policing, how does that fit? And it's super complicated, as in thank you, Andrew, for sharing that case, because that is very much the kind of case that are challenging local communities and challenging the conversation of pluralistic national bodies. I don't know if that made sense.
Well, it does, Paul, but I think the key thing to consider is that churches are even more human than they are. So if we talk about holy in the biblical sense, it just means that we set it apart for use by God. We don't say it's morally better or it's more successful, etc. We like to put apart a sacrificial lamb that is unblemished. But often there are quite a few blemishes on us when we are being set apart for God. And many of our churches do experience that. And in that sense, it's not so much different from a country. These are all, and I'm going to say perhaps a bit too strongly, but all human institutions. Now, of course, there is the concept of church as is a divine institution, and we try to emulate that somewhat. But I would venture that also the concept of kingdom is a divine institution that we would try to emulate.
Go Bas.
Yeah, and it's really funny because if there's a conflicted term in the Old Testament, it is king.
Oh, and in America especially. I mean, our king came to the White House, and then King Charles came to you guys, and then you were still having these big demonstrations, no kings here, and you gave an applause to King Charles because he has such a moderating voice. You guys, you need to get your metaphor straight.
Oh, you pesky Europeans.
If you're not going to mix your metaphors, I'm convinced you don't believe in fun. Come on, man.
They're fine with kings as long as they're not underneath them. As long as they don't have to submit to them.
Yeah.
I need all my relatives who are going to those protests with the, I just want better kings.
I guess this seems like the right time to throw in, like, once you start to admit that, like, yeah, no, there are different levels of, people are at different levels of development. That's why things like, having good laws that govern the people are so important. So kind of giving into the NPC meme is the first step on a legitimizing Christian nationalism. I mean, not in the big spooky, not in the big spooky dread Christian nationalism, but it's just recognition that there's a for a large group of people, like, they need good laws to govern their lives, and providing them with good laws that are well and justly enforced is a service to them that enables their lives to flourish well.
Well, I want to give pushback on that notion while I still got a chance, because I came out of Catholicism, but I'm also aware of the whole debacle, with the Reformation, as far as the 30 Years' War and people forcing other people to do whatever because they believe something different, right? And so we have the freedom of choice, and you can choose to go to this church or that church, and it is not against the law. I don't like the idea of making that law where it's going to be one decision, like it or not, because add a few generations, and before you know it, that one notion that you liked, well, suddenly it's going to turn against you. And if you're Catholic and the Protestant king does what it does, or vice versa, you're a Protestant and the Catholic king does what it, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't want to relive the past where people were dying because you wanted to read the Bible in your own language, and the Catholic hierarchy said, no, you're going to die because you want that. Because the Mass is in Latin, and that's the end, full stop. And so I don't want to go back to those times. I'm sorry, I don't. But anyways, that's my pushback.
Yeah, that was 500 years ago. That was a medieval worldview that had a whole different conception of the human being, of punishment, of all sorts of things. We've changed a lot in 500 years. Reincorporating Christian ethics into law giving, like, is not going to be a 500 leap backwards into the pejorative term of the Dark Ages.
Nope. Sorry, Matt. The reason why is because power is power, and you can't pet the snake and think you're going to be okay. Give it enough generations and power will corrupt. It might start out good, but power does what power always has done. And if you don't know human nature, I'm telling you, power and wealth will corrupt people. If not this generation, give it a few generations down the line. And trust me, corruption, and like I said, don't pet the snake and think you're going to be okay, especially if the snake is poisonous. And power corrupts and wealth corrupts, and all I'm saying is we have the freedom to choose. I like that option.
Alex is down for liberalism. Go ahead, Andrew.
I don't think Matt's disagreeing with you, Alex, that power corrupts. I think he's just trying to say, like, if we look at what Bas said, that Jesus opened up our group, and almost our group is now humanity, are we able to draw lines inside of that of how to best serve the people around us that we define as something of a community, of our country, of our border, of our nation state? Is there space to actually draw lines there of some people that are in or out to best serve them?
Yes, I like what you said. As far as following, so if we're Christians, we do have to follow the example of Christ. Now, tell me where in the New Testament do you find Jesus forcing people to believe what he believes? Tell me when he says, and I'm going to force you to, and I'm going to twist on your arm until you follow me. Like the rich, wise, young ruler, did he tackle him down and say, I'm going to twist your arm until you follow me, guy?
He did say, depart from me, I never knew you. Go ahead, Bas.
The guy who walked around speaking like a king and expected to be obeyed.
I have to head out. Do you mind if I do final?
Okay, final word for Paul, and then he's got to head out. Then Bas.
I'm sorry, I'm leaving out, guys. I think the NPC, like, people, I guess the better way to say this is people with less maturity in their ability to grok the world are more susceptible to the spirits of the world. That is to say, they're easier to manipulate by social phenomena, and therefore there's an accountability by those who are forming the social phenomena, who are running the institutions, to have to have a moral goodness in what they're creating at that institutional level and that social level. So the mind control is very effective. Therefore, I mean, I am in agreement that we should not be forcing religions, and I think Vatican II is also in agreement on that. However, I think there's an accountability that we are providing positive formation that allows people along the way that points to the way, the truth, that is an accountability that we should have. All right, I'm going to stop preaching. Thank you guys, and sorry I have to leave early.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for showing up.
Bye, Paul.
All right, go ahead, Bas.
we do have a nation of laws. We do have many laws. We do have order. We do have, I mean, what more do you want? You want force people to do certain things? You want certain people to...
I don't think Paul Allen's a tyrant. Go ahead, Bas.
You go to a certain church. So I'll say this. Which church should everybody attend by force? Which one out of the...
Living Stones.
Come on, there you go. Yeah.
Well, they can use
Is it going to be Catholic Church, Protestant Church,
my church,
Orthodox Church? Yeah. We have choice. I like choice.
Yeah, me too. All right, go ahead, Bas.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with Paul. He needs a few more members of Living Stones, and then all will be settled, and then he can use that building for 2 more generations. Although, from what I saw, it's not a cathedral or something. It's
a humble church.
They can use it for different purposes. Anyway, just going back, thank you, Alex, for allowing us to have choice, and I think that's true. We do have to choose also, but it's only on the human level. On the divine level, there's no choice. There's one holy Catholic Church, and I confess to be part of it. Here locally, I don't know what is the best embodiment of that church, and I'm not entirely convinced mine is. So I'm quite happy to be open and also be committed, and where I am placed, I will serve. And if I would have been placed in Italy, I would love to be part of the Catholic Church there. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think this is part of the humility that I try to bring in my pitch. We are on the human side of things here, and we are nearing to and sometimes ascending to the divine side. And what often goes wrong is when we, in our human ambition or egocentrism, apply those divine words to our rulings, etc. here. And I think if your father, Andrew, was disappointed anywhere, it's probably because we're mixing up those two categories in a not very productive way.
Can you say more about that, Bas? Interested to see what you mean there.
Well, let me first ask the question: what was your father's biggest disappointment in his church?
I wouldn't say my father's. Well, it's my father-in-law, but it's not his disappointment with church. It's more disappointment with God. That his desired outcome. He had an idea that if he prayed hard enough, and he was a good enough Christian, his wife would come to believe. Okay. And she has not. Therefore, that led to a disappointment in his faith and actively not really practicing as a Christian, yet still walking as a humble, generous, gracious, kind, encouraging man that self-sacrificially serves his wife and his family and kids, and is still the most incredible model of Christian character, but doesn't carry the label.
Okay, good. So that's a good example of how the truth of how God worked in his life doesn't fit the current label, being non-Christian. I mean, what you're telling me is someone who has been influenced deeply by Jesus. Is that correct? In his lifestyle, in his praxis?
Say that again?
What you're describing is a man who has been deeply influenced by the example of Jesus and how he conducts his life.
Yeah.
And he is not able to associate that anymore with the label Christian.
Yeah.
But that's for a different reason, because his theology told him that if he would be good, that he would get his heart's desire. I think
I agree.
Somewhere in his theology, when he was still labeled a Christian, it was performative and not built on grace and not built on humility. And the positive that he received, he still has, which is beautiful. So you can, I would say, you can surprise him by your acknowledgement of that, and show how you are open to what God has been doing in his life, even though intellectually that conception that he had of God at that point in time doesn't fit reality, and it still does not fit reality, and I don't think it ever did.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Bas. I think I raise it more to just to highlight this challenge, I think, in church in general, because I have less of a wrestle with it than I think what I think my standard church upbringing would have had, because their description of him would be that, for, like I said, lack of a better term, he's walked away from the faith and he is unsaved. And I think that's a product of his flawed theology that he grew up with. And how do we potentially challenge that in our current day? Because I think those borders are being challenged, because we used to have fairly neat borders. In my upbringing, it was, did you say yes and walk to the front and raise your hand when everybody else's eyes were closed? And never mind that you did that 100 times, but that's fine. Giving away my church background, but I find the standard Christian answer is largely the same, that it's, as long as you're carrying the label, it's fine, regardless of the maturity that you're necessarily walking with. And I think we've like jumped between the two of those in this whole conversation, where it's, I think the exclusivity is going to be a natural byproduct of us maturing. But if our maturity is more into Christian character, that's going to lead to the service that we were talking about.
Right, Scott. I know Scott's Scott hasn't been on this stream a lot, but you can catch Scott a lot of early morning, and a big piece of Scott's journey has been, navigating between these institutions. And so go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, the question I wanted to postulate was, can that be done at an institutional level? In many ways, I feel, and I said this a couple of days ago, in many ways, I feel like all the institutions have let us down. We don't trust them. And I tend to give pushback with the institutions to say it's more about the embodiment. And I don't know that these structures, at least I haven't seen it in my lifetime, where these structures are actually embodying the kingdom. They're ossified, they're rigid, and that's not to say I think we should all rip them all down. As a matter of fact, I think the call would be to embody the change ourselves, and then find those places within these institutions where they can be baptized, where they can be transformed into something that looks more like the kingdom. But I don't necessarily know that could be the case. I mean, I don't know. That's the question that I kind of pose, is because and I don't think I'm alone here either in saying that a lot of people have lost faith in the institution. So what do we then do now? Can it be transformed? Sorry.
If I may, one, life is hard. There's ups and downs, and if it's not hard right now, give it a minute. And two, we're not immortal, so I'm gonna die, whether I like the notion or not. It's just the way it is, right? I might get sick, I might get cancer, I might get hit by a car, and my family. I have family. Guess what? They're not gonna live to be 140 years old. So life is hard. People are imperfect. I'm imperfect. There's tragedies, you name it. However, institutions are made of people. And we have to remember that every individual is imperfect. Because if perfection was attainable, we wouldn't need Christ. If we can do it ourselves, we wouldn't need Christ. But that's the whole message of salvation. It's a gift that we cannot earn. We don't have to work so that we can earn it. But we have to accept it, and we have to be true to the calling, that we're able to stand against all the frustration and turmoil and all the messiness of the world and of us, because I'm not perfect.
And Alex, I hear you talking about the individual, but part of the question is we recognize that we need institutions. And the challenge is, are those institutions functioning? And part of what's interesting, again, hate to, bat around Andrew's father-in-law too much in this, but that story is very much where this conversation about institution is landing, because on one hand, with the story, you could argue, given his formation within the Christian institution, it's hard to argue that the institution didn't work to help form him in a lasting way in terms of the image of Christ, while disappointment with God as to whether or not the spiritual technology worked in the way that his theology expected it to work. If I pray hard enough, this woman that I've fallen in love with will cross the line as an individual, and that this, will be welcomed into this institution, yada, yada, yada. So, the crisis of institutions is in some ways parallel to this theological technology that Andrew's father-in-law saw as failing, and thus down the line to cast judgments on institutions. And part of the way, you're right, Alex, part of the way that we've dealt with this in America, especially with respect to religion, has been to deinstitutionalize the whole thing, focus on the individual level, and say, we're just going to leave it there at the individual level. The difficulty with that is individuals are formed by arenas, and institutions are really important arenas in the broader arena that we live in. So
this is where, go ahead.
Sorry, I think part of that question is, did the institution shape my father-in-law, or was he shaped by revelation or encounter or transformation, which I think you started with? And I think the institutions are they should be there to protect that and provide opportunities for that encounter, but not necessarily the primary agents of the transformation.
He probably met Jesus because of a very long-lived institution called the church, that if it hadn't been there 2,000 years later, Jesus who? Yes. So, and that's the thing about institutions. They're durable, fallible, but durable, and so much is assumed by how institutions have brought us forward. Okay, we're going to get Bas in there, and then Matt, and Alex wants another word. So things are heating up.
Well, so this is where I see it.
Alex, let me.
I'll try to make
I want to just
break.
I just want to put something positive here on the side of institutions. We're living here now with how many billions of people? We wouldn't be living on this earth with more than 2 million people without institutions. There would not be enough agricultural produce. There would not be marriages to produce good upraising. There would not be any moral foundation. There would not be, go into the New Testament and see how even the institution of the Roman government is promoted, because it sort of creates order. And if any institution was rotten and corrupt to the core, then it was Roman government. But still, without that, we would be less off, because we're simply not sparse enough. There are not few enough of us to be able to deal with nature. We cannot survive dealing just with nature because there are too many of us. We need to coordinate. So I think institutions are driving us forward in a tremendous way. And even if we've lost faith in it, it's because we have overclaimed. We've came to expect too much of our politicians. And we should. It's like the Sermon on the Mount again. We should expect more of them, but never forget that the fact that the institution is there is already producing a lot. And then we should expect more. Doesn't mean, I guess, that that we should not that we should be surprised that people lose trust in their institutions. But there's a way that we should learn from Jesus in, on the one hand, keeping the ideal level on top, not letting go of that, and on the other hand, acknowledging that we're all sinners and that we truly fall short of that ideal. Anyway, that's my hope for at least some appreciation of the work that's being done in institutions.
So this is what I want to say as far as what institutions are. And I do understand that they're not perfect and they will never be perfect. But so I'm going to quote someone that's way outside of, so someone that lived within, before there was denomination. So St. Jerome said that we have to know who Jesus is. We have to know the scriptures. And if you're ignorant of the scriptures, you're ignorant of Christ. And the reason why I say this is because Jesus came around when the institutions were not so hot. Nero Caesar, when the apostles were up and about, the institutions were not very hot. They weren't the greatest. They were flawed. And yet Christianity survived. So we have to trust God that he is in control and that he is powerful and that he will see us through. For the elect's sake, he will intervene when he needs to intervene. However, we have to take the notion that when he called you and me, so when he called me, he called me. So I'm not going to pass the buck to somebody else. And like I said, have the blame itself as far as, oh, my mistakes are somebody else's fault. If he called me, then I better respond with faithfulness and that I got to let God be God and that he will see it through because it's already been done. So past tense, when he says,
all right, let's we're getting low on time here. Skank is waving his mic and then we're going to have closing thoughts.
Oh no, I'm just twitching. You guys are good.
All right. Well, let's do closing. Well, first of all, let me thank the panel who has all gotten in here. I'm going to have Andrew give the closing thought because it's getting on 5 a.m. Andrew has given up his night of sleep to participate on this panel.
It's getting to 5.
It's very much appreciate that. So thank you all. And once I drop the link, you are welcome to go to bed when you need to. Final thoughts. Everybody gets a final thought.
I think we need to do words that fudge again on church. If we labeling church as an institution and assuming that the church as the institution has led to all the progress that we see, because if church, if institutions are there to protect like guardrails, that's like saying the guardrails on the side of a road is what's motivating and powering the cars that are going on them. If that analogy lands. Closing thoughts, I'll come back to just sharing a little bit of what I started with. We have many guides, but few fathers. I think if we're trying to understand what it looks like to mature and grow and progress, and I don't think it's purely going to come through information and guardrails and institutions, as much as institutions can be helpful in providing platforms and environments for this. I think there's an invitation to have more fathers and gifted people set apart to actually participate, to engage with the normies and the intellectual strange people and us TLC people. And I think that's what we're trying to do, of learning how to engage with the world so that we can be prepared to actually engage with anybody and everybody in our families, to raise them up to their full human potential. If we take Bas as our group dynamics is humanity, then even those that are currently operating as enemies could potentially be our brothers. And in the messy challenge of trying to engage with that, I think that's the invitation.
All right.
So,
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else? Final words. Go ahead, Scott.
I would say that I'm not a tear it down kind of guy. I do think institutions are important. I do, however, think that as the society has gone more secular, the institutions have been put in the wrong place. They've been put at the highest. And I think that's where some of the things have been wrong. And that it can be seen as a form of idolatry. And I don't think the church is immune from that either. I do think there are good people in these churches, but to Andrew's earlier point, I agree with that ultimately it comes down to individuals working within these institutions that are doing the work, the cars driving down the road, and the guardrails are in place for a reason, and very, very good reasons. I think as more individuals embody this thing, that we can see a transformation. And I would also make the claim to the father talks that that's where it really starts. I oftentimes think of this whole experiment as a body, and at the very fundamental level are cells. And those cells work together and have like cells that make tissue. Those like tissues make organs. Those organs are the communities, and so on up the stack. And so as we are properly being cells, that healthiness will spread, and as it has throughout kind of human history. So yeah, I think that's great.
The whole family's up at 5 in the morning.
Sorry, I got some visitors.
Every day.
There we go.
That's wonderful. All right, closing thoughts.
So I want to give a practical example as far as we live in modern times, and we do have. I mean, we're blessed. We should be grateful for what we have, and freedom and choice that we have. And yes, the speed limit says 20, and some people are driving under 20, and some people might even drive recklessly. Some people might even drive drunk. But does that mean we have to take down or change the speed limit or do this or do that? It's like, every person is going to do what we think is best or not, and that's just how it is. We Senators, we have to come to terms that it's a messy world, but I have to. So if he says be light, then that's what I have to do, right? Better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So if I begin to tear down everything because I'm upset because people are not driving 20 miles an hour when the speed limit says no faster than 20 miles an hour, I'd be spending my energy in the wrong goal, wrong task. That's a question. Anyways, that's just my opinion. I could be way off, but I say, we got to trust God.
All right. Skank?
Yeah. Kind of going back to kind of like the first half of the conversation. I really enjoyed how this both drifted, and as soon as Paul Allen left, we started talking about institutions while he was gone. But I think one of the things that I brought up a little bit earlier when we're talking about inclusion versus exclusion, and the boundary line, and the idea that, or I think I invoked the idea that like forgiveness is the means by which we move folks from the outside to the inside. And there's two things that we kind of like leaned on a little bit. There's both forgiveness and kind of love of enemies. And I think much like discussions about institutions, both of those terms are important and they are true, but they are intentionally low resolution, so that you're forced to reckon with them and grow in wisdom as you learn how to forgive and learn how to love your enemies. Because there's times where the only way you can love your enemy is by putting them in the penalty box for a while. And or putting yourself in the penalty box if your passions are running too high. And I think one of the reasons that we're struggling, or I know I've got this idea that just the whole kind of like Western liberal political project is intentionally trying to become not a space of inclusion, like a specific body, but it's trying to be that undefined space between inclusive bodies. It's trying to be this like flat egalitarian land. There's no, it's this intentionally undefined space. Yeah, it's a half-baked thought, but that's about all I got right now.
Well, and part of what the whole New Begin thing is saying, is it empty? And because we want to say it's empty, but what is it actually filled with? Because the truth is, even if you want to have a space where there's liberty, liberty actually requires an atmosphere. And that's the difficult part.
In biblical symbology, the wastes are where the demons live.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also where you meet God.
Yes, very much so.
So
it's thin.
All right, here. Bas, you get the final closing comment.
Wow.
And then I start to bring in the masses.
Yeah. I'd like just to put one connector to what Alex has been saying about choice and stuff like that from the Gospel of the Potter. You know the Gospel of the Potter, Alex? Good, good. It's Harry Potter, of course. And it's about it's about learning when to break the rules. And if you watch all those movies, that it's the good heart that really tries to do something, and then he gets to break the rules in the institutions and gets away with it, not without consequences. No. But really, you feel with him. You're on his side. So I really appreciate what you've been saying there, and thank you all very much so far. It's been a lovely conversation.
All right. We have Rod. Rod is pessimistic about the TLC. We only have 37 people watching, and poor daring Hobbit had to beg a $3 membership for the next month, so he didn't have to explain spending $3 on his weird internet friends to his wife. So we are a sad bunch here. Michael Sartori, help us out. What's going on?
Well, my wife just called me, so I lost the last couple minutes, but nevertheless, it's a lot of these topics that we go on a lot. Let's see, where was the thing I wanted to think of? Oh, so, jumping to that thing about institutions and what do we do with them, and the fear of, like too much power and corruption. These are, I think that they're very connected in that, like Jesus with the Great Commission, telling everybody to, go baptize the nations and teach them to do all of the things that I've commanded you. And I think that faith, I'm sorry for being scatter-minded, but I'll start here. So faith is, like the seed. It's whatever comes out of the seed, and that's it's whatever we pour ourselves into, and we always have to do these sort of balancing acts. Like your seed will produce children, but if you are Genghis Khan and you just spread it very broadly, the fruit of that decision, it doesn't get much beyond that biological seed. So, like, just thinking about this as like with the need for more fathers, we have the biological part down. What we don't have is the what comes after it, the fathering, for fathers to pour themselves out into their children. And we can't help but pour ourselves out in some way. That is what our act of faith is. And when we put it towards institutions, that helps us because, it expands our reach, it grows our influence, but it's limited by that rigidity. And I think that's the thing that we're always having to balance. And I think maybe we have poured too much into institutions and we haven't figured out how to get those institutions working to pour back into people. And so that's kind of, that's the place where I think we are at. And it just always is coming through having to renegotiate these things and figure it out in our local context of our families or our local churches or whatever. And so I guess that's just why it's really good to have these conversations. But, have a conversation and then try something you can figure out and then go see if that works and then come back and have more conversations.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Mark D. Parker.
Oh, Boss was singing my tune at one point when he's.
See, Mark, you should join the CRC. That's, just move one step closer to Boss. Dutch Calvinism in Redland, California.
Become Dutch. California Dutch.
California Dutch.
Sounds good.
Yeah. No, it's I think one you it is very, it was almost like right off the bat, you remind me a lot of my dad, Boss. You're considerably younger than I am, but you put off that same energy. So a patriarchal, a man of a pillar in society type of character, right? You may not see yourself as that, but that's certainly the kind of, it's the idea of a compound for the family. My God, that's just like straight on my dad's playbook, right? So there's that. And he would have said
everything that Paul says, huh?
But he would have said something very much like what you said about if I was in Italy
at Boss's dinner table. So you got to take that into consideration.
It would be the idea of wherever I am, I'm going to be happy to participate and thrive. So if I were Italian, I'd be Catholic or something. And but then you stand in stark contrast to much of what occurs in the corner. You represent a pretty unique voice, because what I hear more in the corner is the suspicion of institutions, warranted or not, who knows? But what I heard was that it doesn't matter so much how much we suspect them. They're essential. We wouldn't. Neither would we be here without them, nor could we survive without them. And so the question is how do we mend the anxiety that Scott is feeling? I think Alex expressed to some degree, and I know Skank has a similar sentiments. So, how do we mend that, or bridge, or provide a bridge for people who aren't thriving in the society, or who have deep suspicions about the institutions under which they live, to get to your, more restful space that you find yourself in, Boss? You seem very at ease.
Oh, thank you. I will be part of the city management. The way that we organize it is with a mayor that is not elected, and then you've got 4 or 3 in our case deputy mayors that are elected, and I'll be one of those. And there are a lot of people who are very uneasy about government and very uneasy about whether they are being listened to, etc. And I can assure you they're not being listened to, because the biggest voices get the most attention, and most of the normal people don't get much attention. What we can do is come with a good heart, follow the gospel of the potter. As I said, I want to be part of that and move the needle a little bit. But I know it will always fall short. I already know that. And then I go back to that economic concept that if you trust God, you can trust everyone. And they say, well, if you start making housing available for people, refugees who come into the country, and then people who have been in the country for a long time and can't find a house are very upset about it. And I understand that, and there's a lot of justified anger in that. And still, I don't feel any fear for that discussion. We're going in there with a good heart. We're trying to do our best, and we know we fall short, and then we try again. And I think that's the most restful place that you can be.
What do you do when the lunatics have control of the asylum? Because that's kind of I think that's part of the problem we have in the United States, is that we the problem may not be in the institution per se, but it's in who's controlling the institution, and that may be part of our issue. Because
I think most Americans should spend some time living in the
Little tiny
majority of the
Holland.
rest of the world.
Yeah,
And even when our government is not to our liking, boy, I'll tell you, just spend a few years living in a small Caribbean country, and then talk to me about what government should and shouldn't do. It's
Well, I don't think many northern people. I've seen the polls I've seen coming out of Northern Europe are pretty suspicious of the American.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
sure.
happens as well. There's a lot of suspicion towards the American leadership now. But having said that, you guys have thought so well on checks and balances. Your institutions are pretty durable.
I think we're about to have an election in 2028. I'd put money on it. We're having an election in California. It's going to have a new governor in Sacramento. So anyway, but a lot of chat about one of the things that, of course, I think about is, well, is the TLC an institution? And if so, what kind? Because this institution word is sort of a varied word too. Marriage is an institution, but marriage is a different institution from, let's say, the state of California. And so that word too has a degree of fudginess about it. And I think, part of why once a name emerged, so we were talking last night at the Sacramento Estuary Conference planning meeting, and then the idea came up of a name, and Nate was there, and he's like, yeah, we gave the Northwestuary Conference a name, and none of us know what it was, because a guy who rolls saving throws on his channel called it Northwestuary, and that was it. From then on, you have to redo all the badges. So, and that's kind of, and so when we have the failure or transformation of institutions, and the American government has had many different instantiations with one constitution. I mean, the government today is different from the government of Abraham Lincoln, is different from the government of Andrew Jackson, is different from the government of John Adams. I mean, these are lots of instantiations. And so part of, we can lament our anxiety and disappointment with institutions, but we just keep making more of them. Isn't that a funny thing about us?
1 point extra, if I may, Paul.
Yeah.
Marriage is an institution, but your marriage is an instantiation of that institution, like the government in Sacramento is an instantiation of government. The fact that marriage is a good institution doesn't mean you have a good marriage.
Right. Yep.
Nothing personally implied here.
Yeah.
And this is where I want to come in with the practical to say, make sure that we don't waste our energy in our life fighting the wrong battles where we have not enough power to do anything about, so nothing changes, and yet our life unravels, right? Such as our marriage, our kids, our selfhood, even, because even if you're alone, you could still botch it and you could still go down a downward spiral. But sometimes we get so frustrated about what's happening on the outside, and all our efforts and all our dreams and all our desires and all our years are spent trying to fix the outside, and all we see is it just got worse. and we get more frustrated and devote more energy, and we lose ourselves in the whole mix. That's what I'm saying. It's like we have to make sure that we do not lose our prize. Keep your eye on the prize.
And I like poor Andrew's there. Andrew, God bless you, suffering in the middle of the night for a live stream. I put these kind of things on to put me asleep sometimes, but and I love, part of the reason I love church planters, especially church planters that I've known many of and worked with many of. On one hand, they've looked at many of the institutions that have produced them, and in a sense they say, I bet you we can do better. And the goal of every church planter, they're all sort of start out as anti-institutionalists, and they're looking to give birth to an institution that blesses the world. And I love those. I love those tensions there.
I feel like that's a subtle dig at me, or not so subtle.
It's appreciation.
No, I know. I think, Bas, you were saying if marriage is an institution or your instantiation of the institution, the marriage or the health of the marriage is then going to be determined on the health of the relational intimacy in that marriage. I think the same thing with institutions then. The health of the relationships in those institutions to what actually binds them together and sets them apart. So in church, it's not necessarily the boundary markers that define the success of the institution, but actually the relational strength of the people in that institution and potentially their connection to the founder of those institutions. And so I'm not terribly anti-institution, but I am intrigued at the general reformation of our institutions that's going on globally, whether that's church or government or anything.
And it's funny. So let's talk about marriage. So the instantiation and the institution. If you have, I read Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book Infidel, where she talks about whether or not, when she went into the Dutch Parliament, whether or not the Dutch Parliament would tally honor killings in Islamic families as that or something else, because the expectations around the institution, one simple one, do you beat your wife? Is that part or not part of the marriage institution? And the degree to which you participate in that institution will render something within the instantiation of the institution. And so then we begin to see all of the layers of the institutions at work, because the Dutch government was like, no, we appreciate the fact that in Somalia you had a clan system and that these were the practices over centuries. But here in the Netherlands, we are in a sense going to pierce the walls of that institution and say, you may not beat your spouse. That is not a way to get buy-in in your marriage. And you're not allowed to have that as to be a practice within your marriage. And so there's always this dimension between the instantiations and the institutions. And the reasons we keep updating institutions according to other institutions and norms.
As you're saying that, it's coming to mind Jesus telling the disciples, when you go to a town, have them listen to what you say, and then if they don't take the message, shake the dust off your feet. And it shows you, so a town, going to have one synagogue or whatever, but either way, it's showing that local scale is, there's only so much from us as individuals. We can only go up so many scales with our institutional thought. And even, because you have people find online, I found maybe you find the one true church of the three big ones or something, or you find your perfect denomination or your perfect, particular version of orthodoxy or whatever. And you find that's the perfect one. And then you put it in Google and see how near the nearest church is. And if it's 100 miles away, that's probably not the right church for you. And even if there's one in your town, if you go there and the people are cruel, that's probably not the right church for you either. So, you know, it's, yeah, that it's a good point about we can only wrap our heads around an instantiation at a certain scale. And I think probably the problem that we're wrestling with is that we only have like individual and massive institutions, and we've lost a lot of those middle layers, and that's where the trust really needs to be rebuilt, and figure out like how to verify that that trust at smaller scales.
And the history of instantiations tends then to build and reform the institutions, because if you ask a child what is a marriage, it's the instantiation of their parents and the other ones that the child has seen, which has formed the institution. And so there's always this dynamic going back and forth, and that's a good thing. And I think as we're having these broader conversations about institutions and society, that's pretty much kind of what we're doing. And I think it's pretty normal for human beings. All right, we seem to have landed the plane here. The group is energy is, you know, we've got to get Andrew to bed. I mean, the poor man. What do you got to do later on today for you, Andrew? It's Saturday.
So kids sport and estuary.
All right.
Estuary in 2.5 hours, or 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I'm probably going to be all coffeed out and energied out and talked out. So it's not going to be the most productive conversation, but that's okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me here today. And yes, absolutely wonderful. Great way to come out of the lurk. Really appreciate you signing up. Again, for those who wonder how to get on this panel, usually Wednesday evening California time or Thursday California time, I put a link, not every week, because if I don't have time in the week, I can't do this, but depending on what happens on the ground in terms of ministry. But I drop a link, and then 5 people can sign up. And, you know, some people have noted, why is it all men? And that I don't know. It's most of my audience is men. But men are fine. But a woman can sign up too. So anybody who's a member can sign up, and, you know, a lot of free memberships are usually given out pretty much every live stream. So you don't even need money. So thank you all. And I didn't even play branding at the beginning because, of course, the great Macbeth auditions were happening, and I didn't want to miss those. So let's see. A little bit of branding. I'm gonna have to play one of my favorite poems ever. Chad's poem. Where is it? I can do Ducks Eat Bread. Oh, come on. It's got to be here towards the top. There it is. Thank you all.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. A ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest, treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river, dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. worship in cathedrals where the toys are us, baptized in ball pits, a clown served the sacrament we eat, more Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please, say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
You heard your neighbor go on about Jesus. They claim their life is renewed. You're happy for them and wonder about it, but surely that isn't for you. Well, what does it mean, and where does life lead, and what they say, could it be true? Well, open your mind, my friend, you may find that Jesus is calling you to. We hear explanations, we try to be patient, opinions the world doesn't lack. They say he's the way, have faith and be safe. It's almost as simple as that. You look for a sign, well this is the time. The answers have come into view. He'll wipe all your tears and cancel your fears. Well, Jesus is calling you to a strong hesitation for great invitation, a feeling we've all felt ourselves. And now we are gathered at life-giving water. It overflows out of the well. Well, he is the man and he has a plan. You're wondering what you should do. I tell you, arise, repent, be baptized, for Jesus is calling you to. Though life won't be perfect, few things will be certain. We follow with all of our hearts. We walk in the light, we can see with our eyes. We understand only in part. We pick up our cross, we don't count our loss. What else is there left to do? The way it is right, his burden is light. Yes, Jesus is calling you to. We all know there's something that's wrong with existence. The nations are warring with blame. But what if I told you a good guy, he loves you, but sin, it has kept us away. There's got to be more, and you can be sure eternity time flies into. But as your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to. And when your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to.
Yeah. Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
You walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing? Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
I'm on my I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.